Hi everyone, this is Grace and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to learn how to decorate this sweet baking spirits bright set. So first up is the whisk, and yes, this is a whisk. I've had a lot of questions about what this is. For this entire set, I am doing a 2 consistency outline and flood. Very unlike me for a set like this because a lot of the floods are pretty small, but this particular icing day, my icing was just not cooperating and it was thinner than I would have liked with the flood, and I just didn't have the time or the patience to remix it, rebag it. So I decided for more control, to do a 2 consistency outline and flood. So I did that outline first. I'm letting that dry while I pipe on the wire bits of the whisk. And this is just a piping consistency, somewhere between probably a soft and a medium peak. I do like to let the outlines dry if I can, or at least crust just a little bit when I'm doing a 2 consistency outline and flood here. So you can see my flood is definitely on the thinner side for me, but it still needs a little bit of encouragement with a scribe here to settle out. And I'm waiting to flood that little center section so I can flood in sections so that there is definition in between the sections. And that little squiggle I just did there, that's to help prevent cratering. Although, as you'll see in the end, it didn't really help. So that's why that technique I've found doesn't always work. I'd rather just use a really thick flood and my dehydrator. That green that I piped there is somewhere between, again, a soft and a medium peak, and that's bakery bling sprinkles. Big fan of those. Got a little extra something something. So that is the whisk. Up next is the oven mitt, and this was another design where it's not what I planned to do, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. So again, I'm doing a 2 consistency outline and flood here. See how far I'm pulling my bag off the cookie? I mean, this is a really good example. That's got to be like an inch. And that is how you get the best lines. You really have to kind of drag and guide your icing, I guess is the way to put it, your outlines. I'm just doing a standard flood here. I was going to do that quilting technique, flooding in sections quilting. It's really hard for me. It's a real challenge, something that I wanted to challenge myself to do. But not having a good icing day, I was just not going to be tackling something that's hard for me to do. So I wanted to do something a little easier on my icing, and that's why I'm just flooding the cookie right now, and then once it's dry, I'm going to be doing an etching technique, which is pretty new to me and kind of new in the cookie world right now. It's really important when doing etching that you allow the icing to completely dry. I'd say maybe that's the only downside to doing etching, is that you can't finish the cookie until it's completely dry. So I go to bed with my oven mitts drying, knowing that the next morning I still have to actually finish decorating them. And here I'm just using a ruler and my scribe. This scribe is a pretty sturdy, heavy-duty scribe. I might not recommend using a thinner scribe. I do have varying thicknesses of scribes, and you want to use something that's pretty sturdy. And the amount that I'm kind of etching here is, I would say, a medium amount. There's such a thing as not etching enough, and you're just basically like lightly scraping the surface, versus etching too much. You'll find that out very quickly because you will start to dig into the icing too much, and you'll start pulling out more icing than just this beautiful line across. And I found, I can't figure out the rhyme or reason here, but I love how the etching turns out white here. But sometimes by the next morning, it will have faded that whiteness and it will just look like basically the color of the icing. So you can't really see the etching all that well, which is why I'm applying this edible powder here. This is the Sugar Art Elite in white. And I actually would recommend using a stiffer brush than what I used here. I had to go back through after they sat for a bit with a stiffer brush to really make sure that that color is really pushed into the crevices of that etching. But I like the messiness actually of this larger brush. It really reminds me of my own oven mitts that are covered in flour. Well, I have a cookie oven mitt, if anyone can relate. It's the only oven mitt that I use when I'm baking because y'all know, like, your hands are covered in flour. Can't always be bothered to wash them off. So I have that oven mitt covered in flour. Reminds me of this. So, but I like the effect. It still gets you that square effect of the quilting, but it is so much easier to do, so much easier. So that is the oven mitt. And then up next, yes, this is a pan of cookies. It's a cookie that's a pan of cookies. It is certainly not an original idea for me. This is a thing in the cookie world, especially with this elf on the shelf. A lot of people do an elf with a little tray of cookies, which is super cute. So again, I'm doing a 1 consistency, I am doing a 2 consistency outline and flood. I'm so used to saying 1 because typically I tend to do more 1 consistency these days than 2. But as I've said before, it really doesn't matter whether you do 1 or 2 consistency outline and flood. There are cookiers out there who have never tried 1 consistency. Their comfort zone is 2. That's what works for them, and they do the most amazing cookies. There are other cookiers out there who, for a variety of reasons, choose to just do 1, and that works for them, and that works for their design and their aesthetic, and that's great. I tend to be a bit more ambidextrous on this front. I'm comfortable with both, and I will do one or the other depending on the needs of a set, depending on my mood. You know, some can be a bit more reliable than others, depending on the consistency of my icing. It's a lot of things. So this one, this set, as I mentioned, I chose to do 2 consistencies because I was just having a bad icing day and my icing was a bit thinner than I would have liked. So it happens to all of us, bad icing days. I've let that crust over, and now I'm going through with a soft peak piping consistency here. And I'm doing a soft peak. It's going to settle mostly on its own, which is great, but also these are cookies, and cookies don't have to be perfectly flat. So I did not use a scribe to settle these out. You can see they're already starting to settle a bit on their own. I let those crust over, and now I'm piping with a medium peak the frosting. I can tell it's a medium peak because it's still holding its shape, as you can see. And this was supposed to be like the Loft House cookies you get at the grocery store with the really soft cookies with the icing on top, the frosting. So I did not settle the frosting, and then I put sprinkles on immediately while the frosting was still wet, and then came in to just do a little fine detail to finish off the cookie. And that is the tray of cookies. Up next, we have the piping bag. Again, I'm doing this 2 consistency outline and flood. So when putting different colors next to each other, it is important to outline in the same color as the flood. So I have 3 sections here, one that's green, then the tip will be gray, and then the top of the bag is white. And you'll see there's something a little special that I'm doing when I finish off piping the top of this bag. So this is supposed to be the top of the bag, and I wanted there to be a little definition in the flood. So I'm double outlining here to create a higher outline. So when I go in and I flood this later, you can see if I flood around the outline that the outline helps to hold definition within that flood. So you'll see that in a minute. So here we go. I'm flooding the top and I'm flooding around that outline. So since I did a double outline, it kind of serves as a moat, a barrier in a way that will prevent the flood icing from sinking into each other. So you get this sense of there being like a crimp. It just adds a little extra dimension. That I did there is piping consistency to help prevent this tip from cratering. I really needed to do that, especially because my icing was on the thin side today and just very kind of unstable. And when your icing is thinner and kind of more unstable, you need to do something like that to help prevent craters. So just using a medium peak piping consistency here to do this bow, you can see that the top of the bag has dried and there's still that definition in between. And that is the piping bag. And last but not least is the Baking Spirits Bright Plaque. So this is again from one of my favorites, Kaleidacuts, and it's a hand lettered plaque. So this plaque was made specifically for this lettering that she did. It's a pretty big cookie, so I would definitely have done a 2 consistency outline and flood here. I also like to do 2 consistencies with something like this where there's so much detail around the edge of the cookie, and I find it's a lot harder to really capture all of these different grooves when you're doing 1 consistency. It's not impossible, but I just prefer 2 for something like this. So it's going to take me a while to finish outlining and then flooding, and I'll be back when I'm done flooding. Just for a little extra pizzazz, I'm pumping the Sugar Art Diamond Dust in white. This is a purely edible glitter. It's super awesome. I'll link it in the description of this video. And then once I allow this to crust over quite well, I am piping the lettering, and I'm using a projector here. A projector is a must for me 99% of the time with lettering. And again, this is special hand lettering that was done by Heather at Kaleidocuts for this cutter. Often you can just buy an SVG file from her website of this lettering, and I believe this is one that's available. So if you don't have this cutter, you can still do this lettering on a different shape cutter. The kind of lettering that I'm doing here is called pressure piping lettering. This is the lettering I'm most comfortable doing, and it's called pressure piping because you're adjusting the amount of pressure on the bag. So for downstrokes, I'm applying more pressure, and for upstrokes, I'm releasing almost all of the pressure. I can't release it completely, otherwise the icing won't come out of the bag. This is probably my favorite kind of lettering. Well, maybe favorite. I like the way it looks. I like to pipe it the most. And if I had more patience than I do, I would use a scribe to actually settle all of the big parts of the letters so they settled out smooth. But as y'all know, my patience only goes so far, and it took me something like 6 minutes to pipe this lettering, and that was enough time. So I'm okay leaving it with a little extra texture on it. It's fine. Piping consistency, or excuse me, lettering consistency is probably the hardest consistency to get. The way that I do it is my lettering consistency is a soft peak. And so that means when I pull the icing with the spoon out of the bowl and turn it upright, the tip of the icing completely flops over, but it still maintains integrity, like just barely maintains integrity of the flop. And the beauty of the soft peak is that it is just barely thick enough that it can hold its shape, but if you use a scribe to settle it, it will settle flat. So it's this kind of in the middle that I use for lettering. I also use it if I'm doing, say, small leaves or something that I really want to have poof and I want to make sure they don't crater. So finishing this off, of course, with some more diamond dust, and that is the Baking Spirits Bright plaque, and that is the entire set. It's just a super fun, whimsical, cute set of baking supplies. So I hope you have fun making this yourself.